Hello and welcome. Today is May 19th if you're joining us live, and if you're not, it's whatever day it is, wherever you are. This is the Intune for MSPs meetup. My name is Andy Rostad. That's the last shaking of my camera you're going to get today, but we are going to shake up your understanding of Intune, and especially how, as an MSP, IT professional, admin, decision maker, you can get more out of Intune for your customers. This is our 5th meetup. That means there are 4 meetups if you haven't seen the previous ones, each one chock full of goodness. And today we've got some special guests. We're coming to you from all these platforms. Joining us today is Lior Bella from the Microsoft Intune growth team and Joery Bosch, who's going to give you a really great deep dive today on Intune. Before we begin, as always, we want to hear from you. Take out your phone. You're going to see this slide again at the end if it's, in your pocket, in your purse, on the table, charging somewhere. But we have a survey that allows for you to say, hey, cover this topic, answer this question, and we make these calls to serve you. In fact, our whole mission for this meetup is to understand the needs of managed service providers, you MSP operators, people who are in the console, and to provide you with useful and relevant resources. Today, I think we're really going to nail that. And first, I want to turn it over to Lior Bella to give us his top of mind. Lior, take it away.
Yeah, excited. I can't believe it's already the 5th meeting. I'm truly excited speaking to you here from Redmond, Washington today. And I want to share that in the past couple of weeks or more than that, I've been traveling a lot and meeting with a lot of MSPs. The feedback that we're getting on the program and on this motion is massive, and it's great. We see a massive amount of MSPs migrating right now to Intune and putting all of the solutions around Microsoft 365 solutions. So truly excited for it. And we get really, really good feedback. So if you see me in events or see any other Microsoft from Intune, specifically the events, please give us this feedback. We take everything seriously. But I want to share with you, last week I was at the Ultimate Partner at Bellevue. And that's an event that happens a few times a year across all of the MSPs and enterprise customers. A lot of executives and a lot of leadership team are coming in. And I got the honor to spend a lot of time with also some of our executives like Jose, which is leading our SMB team for the Americas. And it was really good to sit and learn with the partners. But we heard stuff very clearly, and I would love to hear from you through the chat or through the survey that Andy sent about MSP training. How should we conduct them? So we heard it loud and clear that MSPs require a lot more training for their employees, for the team members, to understand how to leverage the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. And I'm excited to be able to support you, but we really want to make sure that we're doing the right thing. So as you've seen in the past 5 months or so, we act based on your feedback. So we would love to hear from you. What does it mean to have better training? Is it the training that you're looking to do online? Are you looking to do training through the ISVs, our Intune for MSP partners that we have in place? Are you looking to do it through the distributors? What is the best thing that's going to benefit you? Also, from a co-sell support, what does it mean for you? Where do you need co-sell support? We understand that there are a lot of opportunities in the market for you. What does it mean co-sell for you? Where you benefit from it, from our help? Also, awareness. MSPs, every time that I meet an MSP and they never knew about our motion, they're like, oh my God, it's actually happening. That's amazing. Microsoft is giving us the attention. Microsoft seeing the opportunity with the MSP. But we all know that it doesn't matter how many blogs, how many LinkedIn posts, how many videos, how many events we're going to participate. We're still not going to reach out to the rest, to the bigger group of the MSPs. If you have any recommendations of how we can communicate to the MSPs and inform them about all of the advancement and enhancement that we are doing, please let us know. Is it a specific event? Is it a magazine? Whatever it is, Discord, whatever you feel that is correct, because we're gonna, and that's leading me to what we're doing next. We are literally spending so much energy in expanding this program. So I'm going to give you a hint, because you're joining those calls. Intune for MSP will be shifting to Microsoft for MSPs, and you're going to see a lot more products including. So Intune was our base level starting the motion, and it's doing extremely well. A lot of our MSPs are leveraging Intune, but we got feedback very clearly that they want more help with Microsoft 365 Copilot, because a lot of customers are asking for Copilot adoption. So how can we help with an assessment perspective? Windows 365, it's picking up a lot, especially with the RAM prices and the cost of devices and the ability to use AI and run cloud literally on the cloud machine all the time. Edge for Business, and we have a lot more security capabilities as well. Any product that you feel that you need help with, that you want to be included in the solution, let us know. We take it very seriously. If we haven't met yet, please feel free to reach out to me even through LinkedIn and give me your feedback. It might take a little bit of time, but I truly appreciate the time, and I truly appreciate that we have the man and the legend Joery over here today to give us his deep dive on all of the information, because he is an expert in this field. So thank you, Joery, for joining us. And Andy, it's all you.
Thanks, Lior. This QR code on the screen right here will take you to Lior's LinkedIn. He's a great and active participant in. It's a great way to engage with him, to follow him, keep up with those announcements that are really on the leading edge of what's happening for Intune. And with that, we'll take a look at today's agenda. It's short and sweet. Well, it's sweet, but it's full of great content. Today, our special guest, you've heard his name a little bit before. I'm going to say it once again so I can practice pronouncing it, but he's a Microsoft MVP and a super user of Intune. He's Joery van den Bosch, and we're going to let him present now to you. For the next 30, 35 minutes, there's going to be an opportunity to ask your questions if you're on the Tech Community Live, or if you're joining us after the fact, send us your drop comments under the video questions. We're going to leave a little time to address your questions, have a little back and forth and interactivity. But Joery's presentation is really great. So I'm going to hand it over to you. Joery, take it away. You're going to present your slides, and you may want to get that sharing aspect going.
Yes, here we are.
All right, here we go. Take it away, Joery. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Lior, Andy, and Heather, and producer Samuel on the back end for making this possible and making sure everything works on the technical side. So yes, thank you, folks, for joining, whether it's live on YouTube, LinkedIn, whatever, every platform that we're on. We're going to talk about the real hands-on with device configuration and policy. What is needed for an MSP or an IT pro or an Intune admin to get everything up and running in a smooth way. So without further ado, that's me. So my name is Joery. I'm a Microsoft Intune and Security Copilot MVP. I'm the founder of Intune Stuff and also a co-founder of the Workplace Ninjas Belgium user group. I'm a long MSP practitioner, multi-tenant Intune Security Copilot. I speak at different events. I do also develop some tools. One tool is also featured in this deck. And I'm an Intune consultant at Arxis, which is a Belgium MSP. So let's dive into the agenda for today. So we're first going to tackle quickly and briefly the MSP problem. Then we are going to check out some of baselines and foundations that you need. Very important is naming convention, scope tags, assignments from the policies. We're going to dive into compliance and conditional access, a little bit about reporting, also from tooling, some real practical lessons from the field, and then in the end is Q&A. I love an interactive session, so if you ask questions, like Andy said, throw them in the chat. Our people in the back end, they will notify me if there is any questions that need to be answered during the call. So let's dive in. So the MSP problem. We have X amount of customers with X amount of policies. There's too many things to maintain. I think everybody recognizes this. And we have a lot of things deployed X amount of times. And this takes time. Configurations drift. There's no streamlining in. So what do we need? A playbook. In the end of this deck, I will show you some steps around the playbook or a playbook. Intune is a flexible product. You can do many things with it in different approaches. The best approach, in my personal opinion, is the approach that works for you. But there are some fundamental basics that you really need to take in account. First, you need to build a baseline. So the single biggest mistake a lot of MSPs and Intune pros is starting each customer from scratch. So the baseline isn't constraint, it's leverage. Every customer you onboard with the same baseline is basically a customer where you already know the failure models, the support patterns, and where to look when something breaks. So important is consistency across customers. When you have a baseline, it's faster onboarding. It takes just days, not weeks. Audit is ready by default because compliance evidence is the policy itself, and your audit policies are already in place. And you gotta stop asking, what do I configure first? Because everything is in place. There are some ways to start your baseline. You can start completely from scratch. So build your own baseline. You'll probably forget some stuff, but you have full control over every setting. It's pretty time consuming and very hard to maintain across a bunch of customers. There is also something called like the Open Intune Baseline, in short OIB, that's built by James Robinson, who is also a contributor of the CIS benchmark. He's also an MVP, and he built basically an Intune baseline cross-platform, which is easy to adopt. It's all JSON files. You can import them into your Intune environment. You can play around with them. Also, again, nothing carved in stone in here. You can change the settings if you want to, but this is a very, very, very good start and easy, very simple. Then you have the security, Microsoft security baselines from Microsoft, obviously vendor blessed, comprehensive coverage, sometimes heavy-handed, and you need to review before deploying. Some duplicates are in there. If you, let's say, import it and assign it, you'll have some conflicts. So yeah, a little bit of taking care is needed for this. And then you have the CIS benchmark. This really exists out of two levels, level 1 and level 2. It's compliance and security focused. There's a PDF of 1,100 plus pages with every setting documented. Beware if you implement CIS, even in level 1, it's a slow release cadence. You need to test everything first. And this comes with a price tag. So adapt without forking, the core baseline, identical across all customers. So what you really need is basically a dev tenant to start from. On that dev tenant, implement the core baseline. And that baseline you push basically to all your customers. Everything is the same, standardized. Obviously, we have custom settings per customer, which is normal. These custom settings, and then it comes to naming a little bit further in this deck. Naming conventions will be super important, but the custom settings can be there. You need to document them, and then you're all good to go. So one source of truth per customer, difference are explicit and not hidden. The source of truth is your dev tenant. When the baseline updates, you reapply them once, and then you push them through all the customers. This you can do with all sorts of tools, and also with the IntuneForMSP partner tools. So the core baseline is your initial baseline template, and the custom overlay, the custom settings per customer. Naming and scope tags. This is basically very important. This is an example. So you can do whatever you want, but this is just an example. I have a screenshot also explaining. To be honest, I don't use this example. We use something different because it works for us. So use what works for you. So I version my policies. Like I said, when I update my baseline, I will give it another version. I always back up the previous versions just for safekeeping and in case something goes wrong. So I version the policy name. I set the platform, the type, a description, a scope, and a D and a U. The D and the U are for a device group assignment or a user group assignment, which is also very convenient. And what you don't want is something like test policy 2 or firewall initial testing, whatever. Don't do that because those policies, they will hardly get cleaned up, and they stay in your tenant, and they cause just like a mess in the tenant. Naming is basically the cheapest investment that you can do. I've seen a bunch of Intune tenants with no naming convention at all, and I think, yeah, that's very, very important. If I ask a question to that IT admin who is managing that tenant to search for a policy, it takes him way too long to find the exact policy. So you don't want that. So naming convention is really, really, really important. This is a good starting point. I made the SIS, I took apart basically the SIS benchmark between the holidays of Christmas and New Year. I've read through that 1100 plus pages PDF file, and I created a baseline, especially for SIS, which it contains, I think, 80 policies, and it's based on version 4. So version 4-SIS, it's level 1, scoped to a device group, handles DNS or user experience or firewall in this case, and then I have the setting that is actually set in that policy. Easy to find, easy to filter out. I can get to my policies in a couple of seconds because I just type into the search in the Intune portal and I find the policy. Scope tags, also very important. If you have like help desk people and they are not allowed to see everything, you can do scope tagging. I think scope tags are really underused, especially in an MSP context. And they are there to let a junior tech work on a customer's A, like, for instance, a BitLocker policy without seeing customers' B's, anything. Combined with that naming convention, it becomes very hard to make cross-customer mistakes. So it creates basically a bulletproof environment where they cannot make mistakes. So which is better. Point of failures, keep them at a strict minimum. Also very important, document this because if you have a lot of customers, yeah, it can be difficult to remember all the settings that you did. So documenting is like very important. And I know it's time consuming to set up all the scope tags, but you will benefit at the end. Assignments, the actual hard part. The most questions that I normally get is when to scope a policy on what group. Is it a device group or a user group, etc., etc. There is no like real rule to do it. You can scope whatever you want to a user group or a device group, that's fine. But there is some logic. Just use your common sense. If the setting protects or prepares a device, assign it to a device. And if the setting follows a person, assign it to a user. So device scoped examples are like BitLocker, compliance, security baseline, firewalls, certificates, and anything to the hardware itself. User is bookmarks, email, OneDrive, so everything tied to the person and not to the device. That's basically the golden rule. And it's not really a rule. You can change it if you want. But for troubleshooting things and just to make it like clear, just use your common sense. There's nothing more to it, basically. There are some caveats, obviously. Autopilot pre-provisioning. With autopilot pre-provisioning, no user is signed in during pre-provisioning. So if you scope everything to a user group, your enrollment will last like seconds, but there's actually nothing much landed on that device. So if you send out or give the device to the end user, your device is not basically ready, but it's like incomplete. Push what belongs to the device scope, and just accept that some user scope setting land at first sign in. Just do that. It doesn't matter if the user still needs to wait like 15 minutes or something. He can work, so the device is basically already set up. But if some bookmarks in Chrome did not land on the device, I don't think that is like that big of an issue. And so that's the importance also of the D's and the U's in the naming convention. If we do an Intune project and we leave out that, and that's my personal experience that I saw in a couple of environments, in a couple of companies, we got the question, but yeah, we have like X amount of policies. How do I know to assign this to a device or a user group? And that's when we added those D's and those U's to make it more clear. Let's skip to groups, dynamic versus static groups. Obviously, dynamic groups are self-maintaining via the rules. It's great for OS version, ownership type, device category, and it's also super great for autopilot group tags. Don't overcomplex your rules, and you need an Entra IDP1 license for that. Do dynamic by default. It's self-healing as your device fleet changes. Use static when you genuinely need a fixed list, like a pilot group or some executive devices or something. And the mistake is made to using static groups for convenience, more likely. But then they got stale, forget to maintain. And like 6 months later, you have like 30 device groups and basically no idea if they still are accurate or not. For autopilot group tags, it's really convenient. So when you do an autopilot device, you upload it into Intune, you give it a group tag, you create a dynamic device group based on that group tag, and that group will be automatically filled up with those autopilot devices. For dynamic groups based on devices, you have less properties to fill in than for users. For users, you have like department, phone numbers, locations, whatever. It's not there for devices, but for devices, you can add extension attributes. So the extension attributes you can add to a device, either with Graph Explorer or with a combination of Graph API and PowerShell to add some extension attributes. And you can make a dynamic device group based on that extension attributes. And I think you have like 10 extension attributes that you can fill in. This is an example of a device group with a group tag from Autopilot, which I think is very convenient. The second part that comes with groups is filters. Filters and groups are partners. One important thing is to not use the all users or the all devices groups, because they're not real Entra groups. They're virtual targets. They look convenient, but they will bite you when you do exclusions on auditing, on edge cases like accidental enrollment, which is coming in the next slide. So always assign to a real group, and don't use the all users or all devices. So real groups, they can handle structural decisions, rings, user scope, customer scope, ownership tiers. The filters are really important for excluding and including. So you can just do a more granular filtering on those devices. This is a filter that is basically says personal devices. I'll explain this in the next slide. But really important, avoid the all users and devices. One little caveat is Intune allows only one filter per assignment. So give it a good thought on how you would approach your groups and filter assignments, especially the filters, because you can have only one. But give it a good thought. It's something that I see like a lot of times. And I see it in like instantly when I open an Intune policy and I see the assignments and I said, this is not very well thought over. And basically they need to go back to the drawing board and make something like a logical group, set of groups and set of filters to maintain their assignments like pretty much all right. So about those personal devices. So auto MDM enrollment, it's a setting within Intune. Everybody knows that. It's scoped to all users by default. Personal devices are also allowed. Personal phones, tablets, and whatever. They enroll, and if you have the auto enrollment on, they will get corporate policies. So we saw that with the pandemic, with COVID. Suddenly, a lot of people needed to work from home, and it was urgent. So everybody said, okay, go on your home device and do it. So we got a lot of people who had the BitLocker enabled on their home machines, which is, yeah, not good, obviously. So if you, for any chance, have the need to do personal devices, you can exclude the personal devices filter onto any group. This is the query for those personal devices, and you can exclude them from any policy or any app that should never touch personal devices. And this is also why all users and all devices, virtual targets, are dangerous. But you can block them, obviously, with the new setting that is enabled by Microsoft now. I think it's there for like a month or two. In your enrollment, there is now a tick box that you can tick. You can see the Tech Community website or just read my blog on it. I wrote a blog on it to avoid the accidental enrollments, because you don't want that. The next one is compliance and conditional access. Very important also, and they need to work in combo. So, but they're not the same. A configuration policy pushes a setting to a device, so it makes it so, like BitLocker on, screen timeout, Wi-Fi, whatever, and a compliance evaluates the condition. So is it so? Minimum OS version, no jailbreak, checks for BitLocker. And I see this quite some time. So an MSP or an Intune admin creates a compliance policy, example, BitLocker. But BitLocker isn't a compliance question, it's a configuration. So the policy checks whether BitLocker is on, but it doesn't turn it on. You need both. So you need both policies, and they're separate objects in Intune. So confusing the two is the #1 reason that policies will not work. The loop. So a device enrolls, the configuration applies, compliance evaluates, Entra ID receives the compliance state, and conditional access grants or blocks it. The loop only closes when conditional access uses the compliance state to make a grant or block decision. The number of tenants that I audit, where there's a beautiful compliance reporting, says 92% compliance and no conditional access policies that does anything with that number is yeah, to be honest, it's depressing. I know it's a kind of, yeah, hard block when a device is not flagged compliant and it's blocked from accessing company data. But without step 5, basically compliance is just a report gap. So the compliance policy exists, but no conditional access policy uses it. I got a lot of comments, feedback for, yeah, if we have a lot of users with extended leave, health issues, spare device, refurbished, returners, heavy travel roles, when they come back, their device is flagged non-compliant. There's some good practices that you can do. Prevent it with grace periods on the compliance policies, 7 to 14 days. Email them and do realistic rule thresholds. So don't use the 24 hours, but make it longer. Reactive, handle when it happens. Return from leave, help desk runbook. The pre-flight on return, force Intune syncs, verify the compliance. Monday reporting, weekly CA blocked, check the sign-in reports, or HR can give IT the signal that somebody is coming back after X amount of time. Strict compliance for sensitive workloads, use sparingly, and only when proactive and reactive are not enough. but just go ahead with the basics, but don't loosen the compliancy. Don't disable the required compliant device, because that's a really security gap. So how do you tackle it like the best? A user returns from an extended leave, whatever it is. The device has been offline for weeks, months, whatever. So compliance have drifted, they sign in, conditional access evaluates, non-compliant, it blocks from M365, bad experience. So what actually happens? So the device powers on after weeks or months, compliance state is drifted, so no compliance anymore. It probably did not have the Windows updates because the device was off. So the user signs in, conditional access evaluates, not compliant, blocked. In the background, Intune syncs runs because the conditional access and the Intune compliance are two separate things. So it's self-healing. Intune will self-heal because as soon as the device powers on again, it connects to Intune, it will sync, it run the policy updates, the remediations kicks off, compliance reevaluates, but it can take 15 minutes to several hours to get it up and running again. So this can take some time. So the device flips, the user has no access. For the first day back from a like 3 to 6 months maternity leave or recovery or whatever, it's a brutal experience. They're trying to read like 800 emails that they missed, rebuild context, and they can't get into Outlook because the device really thinks that it's basically still on the day of departure. The best approach, document a returning from leave, because those people, they will call help desk. Document everything that you need to do. Force an Intune sync, wait 30 minutes, verify the compliance, restore the access. And it basically turns a 4-hour panic into a 10-minute ticket. Okay, the end user still needs to wait. But HR can also do it. So when HR knows that somebody is going to come back at that day, the help desk is prepared. They can do the runbook. And what definitely not to do is really don't loosen the compliance globally. The trap is fixed with the grace periods and the procedures, not in weaker policies. Reporting signals. What is actually deploying and what isn't. It's a per device check-in state. Is the device even talking to Intune today? That's the first thing you should do. The per setting status in the settings catalog is basically the killer features of the settings catalog. You can see every single setting with a success or an error or a conflict, and it tells you exactly which one of the settings failed instead of just basically policy setting failed. There are some error codes also, which you can troubleshoot then. And there are also a lot of third-party tools that can do the reporting for you. I must say, Microsoft and Intune is not the champion in reporting. So there are a lot of community tools out there, and also the IntuneForMSP partners. They have some tooling around reports. But yeah, use them. But those are the 5 like most important things that you can see. These reports are per tenant. So you need to log in every tenant. But like I said, there's a lot of tools out there that can do like the multi-tenant stuff. Conflicts. These are like, some things within conflicts people tend to know. I'm going to try to finally clear out the conflicts. What happens when a conflict is happening? Is it in the settings catalog? Is it on iOS? Is it on a compliance policy? Because they are like really different. So Intune flags conflicts. Sometimes conflicting policy does not show in Intune. Real conflicts cost hours to find manually. You need to scan the tenant, and it will take you a lot of time. I've created a tool called the policy agent. It does more than conflicts, but the conflicting settings are like there, and you can see basically the policy, which setting is conflicting and where the conflicting policy is, and also the number of conflicts are there. Also within Security Pilot, It has a built-in conflict detection through the embedded Copilot prompts in settings catalog and compliance policy. And if you are on Microsoft 365 E5, you will get security Copilot within the license, and the tenant flagging for that starts this summer. You will get a message in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center message center 30 days up front when your tenant is ready for flagging, and then you can just play around with it. Do check out the Microsoft article on that one. So policy conflicts. The general rule when a conflict occurs. So Intune generates an error and doesn't apply either setting. So this is for Windows and a settings catalog. So if you have a conflict in a Windows settings catalog, the setting will not be applied. There are some exceptions. In compliance policy, if you have a conflicting setting in a compliance policy, the most restrictive setting will win. If you do app protection policies, the most restrictive setting will win. However, for pin not pin attempts, but the number of numbers in the pin, the most secure wins. And in order, the first deployed policy takes precedence. So the second one is shown as conflict, but you don't know which policy lands first on the device. So that is like a little bit different. So custom iOS and iPad policies. This is basically the worst case. If you have like two custom iPad iOS policies and that conflict, Apple resolves them, not Intune. And Apple resolves them randomly. So different devices can land on different values. This is why everyone with a fleet of iPhones and a couple of conflicted custom payloads have the why is this iPhone different than the other iPhone? And you will get support tickets for that. This is also explained in the Microsoft Learn articles, and you can just read them if you want. But this is like really important because the general idea is when a policy is in conflict, the setting is not applied, but that only goes up for the system catalog in Windows. So tooling at scale, stop doing stuff by hand. I listed up 3 layers of automation, basically. And there's actually 4, but the 3 important pillars is most MSPs or Intune admins or IT pros, they sit at layer 1. They use scripts or tools that use scripts, and that's fine. But the moment you have like more than 3 tenants to manage, it's getting difficult. It's getting harder because there are some differences with custom policies and stuff like that. So you do lose track a little bit. There is also something like the Intune CD. It's a free open source repo that you can use. It promotes the dev and the prod tenant. It can be tricky to set up, and some Python knowledge is required. And then you have orchestration, which uses the Power Automate, Azure Logic Dapps, or your professional services automation engine. It's used for cross-tenant workflows, new customer onboarding, scheduled multi-tenant tasks, and also required skills, the appropriate licenses, and also a lot of time. And basically, level 4 is use specific tooling that is out there on the market. Either it's community or paid tools that are part of the IntuneForMSP partnership. So one back. So some lessons for the field. There are some common gotchas. Skipping the test tenant. I'll test in prod. No, you won't. Please do have a test tenant ready to put your baseline on when you create it. Test everything there. Enroll some test devices there. See if everything works, and then deploy it to the customers. The naming convention, I can't stress this enough. This is so important. All your customer tenants will be standardized. with the same part for the custom settings, of course, but also do try to name these custom settings, document these custom settings so that you know which settings are really custom to the specific customer or tenant. Unassigned policies that nobody removes, they will accumulate. So again, the importance of the test tenant, keep also that test tenant or that dev tenant, keep it clean. You don't want, like, if you push directly from that test tenant to your customer tenant and you select all policies, you might do like unassigned policies or policies that you don't need and push them to the customer's tenant, which you don't want. Mixing user and device assignments on one policy. This is like pretty straightforward. If you go to the assignments on an Intune policy and you do the assignments, Intune already warns you from step 1 to don't mix user or devices in inclusions and exclusions. No exclusion strategy for blade grass and service account. If you lock yourself out, it's a pain to get back in. It will take you a couple of days. So if you lock yourself out once, you will never do it again. Always make backups for changes. There are some tools for that, open source, whatever. Trusting compliance state without actually enforcing. Like I said, use compliance with conditional access policies. Building too many groups when one filter could do. That's repeating what I just said about the groups. Do think a lot about those groups. Don't like go over it like in an hour and said, okay, this is fine, but really think it through, make a group strategy. Don't do manual Win32 packages unless it's like really needed. There are also a lot of tools out there that will do it for you. But we all know that app packaging takes a lot of time. And please do version your policies. If you don't do the versioning and you need to roll back, you wish you had versioned your policies. And last but not least, please pay attention to conflicts. And this resides back to the dev tenant or the test tenant. If you have tested thoroughly and you have enrolled a couple of devices already, usually the conflicts are already solved. For greenfield setups, it's all good because it's clean. You will push your baseline onto it. No worries at all. There is no conflicts. But if you have like a brownfield setup with some Intune policies already there with the customer, please do an assessment first. Also, a lot of tools out there, community tools out there on the market that you can check, that you can do a assessment and you can do a compare to those policies before you drop your baseline onto that. So pay attention to the conflicts. Then we go back to the playbook. Basically the foundation, and for every customer, the dev tenant, test everything here, create a baseline with OIB, your own, or a combination, or use SYS, or a combination of all of them. One naming convention agreed upon and very well documented. About documentation, there are some very good tools out there to document your Intune environment, like intunedocumentation.com, Intune Assistant, very good tools to document your complete Intune environment, and a backup workflow. So pick one tool and stick with it. And then per customer, this needs to be repeated for every onboarding. Apply the baseline, like I just said, tag everything with scope tags, apply the naming convention, assign with real group, and use filters as partners. Wire the compliance into conditional access and do pilot rings before prod every single time. And please do document the customer overlay centrally. So do document all the customers' custom settings. It will save you a lot of time and pain in when there's support tickets coming in. And monitoring, reporting at least weekly, because it needs to be done. It needs to be done, especially when it comes like drift. If you got drifting policies, either you get flagged for it, you can accept it, you can roll it back. Sometimes the partner or the customer that you are servicing, they make some changes themselves without informing you. You catch the drift initially, and that's where the proactive is there. Initially, you call the customer and say, hey, we have detected the drift. Is this really what you wanted to do or not? And then you can accept that or discard that and roll back the original setting. And now we have some time for a Q&A. So I don't know if there are any questions rolled into the chat. I was not following.
We have
please.
questions for you, Joery. First of all, this was fantastic. You haven't been following the chats and the comments, but the LinkedIn viewers have been crowdsourcing solutions to their issues, inspired by some of the guidance that you've been giving. This is really good stuff. I know for those of you asking, there will be a recording. It will be available. There's so much good stuff here you're going to want to go back to. Let's dive into a question here. This came from LinkedIn. Can you talk about, the question was, is there a way to just add devices in Intune to a dynamic group? And there's some confusion, like it adds devices from Entra, and you had talked a little bit about the P1 device, but how should an admin think about creating dynamic groups and that interplay between Entra and Intune? Why does it matter? You know, should we be taking heroic measures to try to Intune group? This is one of the things that has sparked a lot of conversation.
Basically, it's very easy. So you have the device blade in Entra, and you have the device blade in Intune, and also the users in the groups. It's basically the same. So those three blades, like, shall I call them blades, user groups and devices are exactly the same than in Entra. So that's a copy. What you can do is you can create dynamic device group based on a lot of things. For instance, OS version. But like I said, with users, you have a lot of options. So you have departments, you have telephone numbers, you have managers, you have whatever. There's a lot of attributes that you can fill in. For devices.
And those come from Entra more. The question at hand was like, hey, how do I separate my Dells from my Lenovo's from my other OEMs?
Yeah. We had basically the exact same thing, but then not like Lenovo's or Dell, but we needed to split them into countries. So we had a customer from different countries, and they wanted dynamic device groups from specific countries. That's where we started working with those extension attributes. So we added specific extension attributes to that device, and then with a dynamic device query, we split those devices into those separate groups. And you can do basically the same for the manufacturer or the model. It's basically the same. What you fill in that extension attribute doesn't matter. You can fill in anything. But then with the extension, and I think those are the most flexible, there are some attributes that you can fill in on that you have on the device, and there are some queries on the device out of the box by default. I don't know them by heart, but if it needs to be like super variable, I always fall back to the extension attributes option, because you can fill in whatever you want, and in the query you can also have that extension attributes containing whatever you want. That's the most flexible one.
Excellent, excellent. So I think the headline here is, do not think of there being a wall between Entra and Intune. It is a permeable membrane.
Yeah, correct.
Excellent. Okay, another question that was on the topic of conditional access. This is a quote: "We really struggle maintaining anywhere close to 100% compliant devices with the active Windows devices in Intune across all of our MSP clients. The difficulty is in turning on a conditional access policy, and it feels like there's too many things that trigger a compliance failure. A small policy conflict unexpectedly will make a device non-compliant, or a device update causing BitLocker non-compliance." What suggestions do you have for somebody who wants to get to 99, 100% compliance, but is really finding that they're playing a game of whack-a-mole with all these different exceptions and inclusions? What has been your experience in dealing with that?
Yeah, basically what I see from experience is the bigger the environment, the harder it gets, because a lot of people are on the road, on sick leave, on vacation, hardly coming to the office, hardly travelers, frequent travelers. But the thing is basically the grace period. Set this one as long as possible. And I know, and I it's also in my personal hassle. When a device becomes non-compliant, it gets blocked from accessing resources. I know, and it is like whack-a-mole indeed. But try to 100% compliance. I've never saw it, to be honest. Not even in a small company. Yeah, with 10 devices, yes. But like I said, the harder it gets harder when the companies get bigger and the device numbers get bigger, because there's a lot of variables that you need to take in account, and you just cannot cover them all, because we are humans. We take our devices, we do get sick, we go on leave. You cannot cover it all, but what you actually do need to know is, I know it's a hassle. I know you will get help desk tickets, but is it worth it to have a security leak instead of a help desk ticket, resolving that with that runbook that the help desk needs to do, and syncing the device again, and that user needs to wait an extra hour before they can read their mails? Is that worth that specific security leak? Maybe. That's a question that those company needs to ask themselves. Are they willing to open up some ports where people can do strange stuff and basically open their environment? I have no straightforward answer for that, because the straightforward answer basically does not exist.
I think you said it best, that this isn't an issue of technology. This is an issue of humanity. And, I think the expectation especially when customers are parting with scarce resources and they're investing in a concept of security or a plan of security, I think it's tempting to want to say, there's going to be absolute, we're going to get to 100%, and nothing ever gets there. Even at 5 nines in a big organization, there's some gaps. And so I think that comes down to a lot of explaining the sort of the Swiss cheese stack model of security, and having a clear story that not only do you understand your own, say, for example, zero trust approach with your customers, but do something like, we have the Zero Trust Workshop, which is a free resource that we make available. I think there's a link at the end of this slide, with your customers. Do it with them so that they can see and understand all the different ways in which they're protected. Conditional access is, of course, foundational to the Zero Trust security, but it's just one piece of cheese with a couple of holes in it. And again, we layer that all because there's no such thing as absolute security. There's just better and better protection.
Yeah.
So awesome answer. I want to talk about one more question before we let Joery go.
If I can,
and that is that.
If I can
go ahead.
For the previous question, for the dynamic device groups based on the Dell and the Lenovo, there is a query out of the box device manufacturer. So you can use definitely a dynamic device group based on device manufacturer, and you can split them even, you can filter them more down with device manufacturer and device model. So you have like an HP, whatever the number, you can filter, you can create a dynamic device group based on HP and that specific model.
Okay, we've got another interesting question. This is somebody's red flags went up when you talked about don't use all devices and all users.
Yeah.
There may be some people already using all devices and all users. Can you speak to how to get out of that situation? And then if you do want to target all devices, how should someone go about thinking about that? The suggestion here was, would you recommend like a dynamic device group that includes all Windows devices but excludes personal devices with a filter?
For instance, that is already a good option. The thing is, those two groups, all devices and all users, aren't really groups. it will, I'm not going to say like in an environment like 20 devices, you don't use it. You can use it. But if you go like SMB, corporate, or enterprise, really don't use it. Because at some point in time, you will probably need to do some exclusions or do some other things with auditing or reporting and stuff like that. And you will definitely guarantee you will run into problems. You will get errors, unexplainable errors. And those lead back to the use of those all users and all devices groups. To go back from that is like also what I was hammering about. Think through your group strategy. Think it through. See that it makes sense. There is no basically best practice or something. I spoke in the beginning of, in Intune, you can do many things to get to the same solution. The correct solution is the one that works for you. We can just advise. So for going back from all devices and all users, one way is exactly to create a dynamic device group saying all Windows devices. Because if you're using all devices and you're using them on all policies for Windows, Android, iOS, you will get in the reports a lot of non-applicables. They're there. If you do use the reports, you have a lot of like unnecessary data in there, which you don't need there. So it will just like fill up your reports, your CSV files, your Power BI, whatever, with stuff you don't need. So basically, to create a Windows only OS group is fine, and then an iOS group and an Android group, and so forth and so on. For the users, for all users, I would recommend then create a user group based on the SKU of the Intune license. So if you have a business premium, a Microsoft 365 E3, E5, EMS, whatever, Intune is incorporated in that license. There is a Microsoft Learn page, which have all the SKUs listed up. It's like a really long table, and you can create a dynamic query based on the user, or you can just use user group licensing and put that group in instead of the all users group. And then you only have the Intune licensed users.
Incredible stuff. The demand for your time is great. The amount of time remaining, less so. I'm going to wrap up. Thanks again, Joery, for being here. I know we're going to have you back again soon. Samuel, if you'll bring up my slides, I just want to talk to, first of all, as a naming convention devotee, I can say that my biggest takeaway from Joery's talk was that the best investment you can make is good naming and a good file naming scheme, a good policy naming scheme upfront will improve. It's not just for Intune folks, but I'd love to hear what your favorite takeaway was in the comments, wherever you're tuning in, or go to Tech Community Live. We want to hear from you. What are the conferences? We don't have anything on the near-term schedule. Lior's got to recharge his batteries. But what are the conferences? What are the meetups? What are the events that you think are must attend? We're looking at planning out for the next year. Where do you want to meet our Intune experts and have face-to-face conversations? We love them. We learn so much from real field experience. And a lot of what Joery was talking about, a lot of your questions are about what should we do? Joery said, hey, there's a lot of ways to do things in Intune. So we created this series of videos. We call them step-by-step guidance. The formal name is long, but what you'll find is it's based, go to aka.ms/IntuneForMSPs. You'll find the how to provision a tenant checklist, videos based on every checklist step and more. And right now we're doing a little micro series on registering macOS devices. Next week, we're dropping another video on macOS. So keep coming to the calls to get these updates. Subscribe to the M365 YouTube channel. I think super great value there. Here's the link to that resource page. Again, we've got stuff for business development, plug and play marketing campaigns, and again, comments where we want to hear from you. How can we serve you better? And the best way to do that, of course, is to fill out the aka.ms/IntuneMSP survey. I'm going to leave this QR code up for you as we sign off. Thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in after the fact. We read all your comments. We try to answer all your questions. And we're really pleased to be able to speak to you as an MSP community. We want you to speak to us. So let us know what you think. And thanks for being here. Be well.